Well, all this money that's being borrowed in order to do this stimulus spending has to be paid back, right? And
Yeah.
eventually you have to tax the citizens in order to pay the money back. Is that correct?
The revenues that the government takes in come from taxation, and the key point there is, of course, I think the implication of your question that you have to tax citizens to pay it back. What you really is true, of course, but what you really have to do is get citizens back to work, get the economy growing again. Because then, without raising taxes, without adding new tax measures, you simply have people back to work paying taxes again, earning, spinning off revenues. So the key here right now is to get the economy growing more quickly.
So if the money that the government uses for the stimulus package, spending package, is collected by taxing the citizens, then that doesn't increase real demand, does it?
Absolutely.
It does or doesn't?
Well, it does. I mean, I just gave you an example that.
So
that
if you take it from,
let me say.
Let me just make sure you get the question right.
I told you before, and I want to be clear about this. And this is not my estimates. This is the estimates of independent analysts. The stimulus, which was financed by budget deficits, created 2 to 3 million jobs, created or saved, added a few points to GDP growth. New demand that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So QED, as proven, really, there you have it.
Well, that money that's taken from the taxpayer is money less that he has to spend. Is that correct?
No, that money is not taken from the taxpayer today. Remember, this is deficit spending. This is money this is money that comes from future growth.
Well,
and
the government
payments.
gets it both ways. It gets it by taxing and by borrowing. Is that not right? Okay.
I'm not really understanding.
Well, the money that the government uses for the
Right.
spending stimulus, they get partly from taxes and partly from borrowing. Is that correct or no? Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're conflating the dynamics. You seem to be saying, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, that in order to finance the deficit, the government took in more tax revenue. And of course, that's not true. Taxes have gone down. Overall.
No, I wasn't saying that. I would say whatever the government spends, it can only get in two ways. It can either get it from taxes,
right,
or borrow it. So this spending stimulus,
that's right.
This spending stimulus
Correct.
was acquired. The money to do the spending stimulus was acquired by taxing and borrowing.
No,
only by borrowing.
Only by borrowing.
And that's
why we have a higher budget deficit now.
But that borrowing means that other people can borrow less, right?
No.
No, they can borrow the same amount, the same dollar that they lent to the government, they can lend to someone else.
Not the same dollar. No, the flaw in your logic is that the glass again. You're operating from a position of a glass being full. You keep forgetting this point, but it's actually very central. If the glass is full, if the economy is moving at full capacity, then you're right. A dollar that the government takes is a dollar the private sector doesn't have available to it. But at a time like this, we're really suffering from what Keynes called a liquidity trap, meaning that there is excessive savings. There's more savings in the world, in the country, but also in the world. There's more savings than the economy wants to absorb right now.
Well, you say that there's excess savings,
right.
But compared to China, we have a lot less savings, right?
I'm not just talking about the U.S.
Or a lot of other countries. So, I mean,
I'm saying that there's excess global savings.
And you need savings in order to invest. If there's no savings, you can't make any investment.
Okay.
Nobody can borrow anything,
Again,
right? Is that correct?
You're wrong.
You can borrow without anybody saving anything?
Here's where you're wrong. You said you
if
need
nobody's savings, you can still borrow?
What you said is that you need savings in order to invest. Savings equals investment.
Well, there has to be savings in order for somebody to invest. If nobody saves, nobody can invest.
True. But my point is this. See, the problem with your logic it's the kind of the logic of pre-Keynesian economics. Your logic seems to be that savings equals investment, and if the government dissaves, there will be less investment. That's kind of where you're coming from. Well, in fact, if the government runs a deficit, there'll be less investment. It doesn't work that way. The
president and the Congress came to an agreement to increase the debt limit, right? And they also came to an agreement about spending in the next 10 years. How much in spending cuts will this spending agreement provide?
At least In spending cuts, well, we won't know until the supercommittee finishes its work. So far, it's been about $1 trillion.
And if the supercommittee performs its function, it'll be another $1 trillion in spending cuts.
Wrong. We don't know, because the supercommittee could come forth with a plan. In fact, they should come forth with a balanced plan, which includes spending cuts and revenue increases. So you asked about spending cuts.
Only about spending cuts, yeah. So
well, we don't know. If the supercommittee fails.
Up to now, $1 trillion in spending cuts,
right,
and maybe some more with the supercommittee. Is that correct?
Certainly some more with the supercommittee, but we don't know how it'll be balanced between spending cuts and revenue increases.
How much was spending in 2010? Federal spending.
Federal spending, 2010, 3.3 trillion, something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but around that neighborhood.
And how much was it projected to finish in 2011?
Outlays, I'd have to look at my OMB data to remember that exactly, but around the same neighborhood. Maybe, let me see, 3.2, yeah, in that neighborhood.
I saw it recently. I think it's their projection, COB is 3.7 trillion for 2011. Do you happen to know what is their projection for 2016?
For spending?
Yeah.
I tend to think of these things in terms of GDP, which is really a better way to think of it, because you have to control for the growth in the economy. So what'd you say, 19?
16.
2016, I would guess that spending as a share of the economy would be somewhere in the 18 to 20% range.
Well, the amount that CBO projects is 4.5 trillion.
I think that's about.
That makes sense?
I think that's about. I believe that's in the 18 to 20%. Yeah, that's in the 18 to 20% range of GDP.
For the last year of the agreement, 2021, the spending is projected to be 5.7 trillion. Is that correct?
I don't like the way you're doing this in the following way. It's really wrong to trot out these trillions without saying what a share it is of GDP. You should go ahead and trot out the trillions, but also say what share we're talking about in terms of GDP.
Well, I'm just talking about the numbers.
No, I'm talking about the numbers too.
So
if you say for example, if you say that the spending rises from 3 trillion to what'd you say, 5.7?
5.7, and
so
according to CBO.
How does that change as a share of GDP?
That's another question.
It starts at about 18 or 19 and it ends at about 18 or 19. So spending as a share of the economy doesn't change under that projection. I think it actually goes down.
But spending, according to CBO, is in the 2021 5.7. Okay.
That's not the correct number. The correct number.
That's what they say. I'm just taking their word for it.
The correct number. The way to talk about this, unless you want to mislead your viewers, which I hope you don't want to do, is to talk about it as a share of GDP. Spending right now as a share of GDP is about 24%.
But that's an interesting question.
Spending as a share of GDP. Let me finish. Spending as a share of GDP will go down under the CBO projections from 24% down to 17 or 18 or 19, as I recall. So spending as a share of the economy is actually, according to CBO, it's actually on a downward glide path.
So why is it that when the politicians and you talk about this agreement to cut spending, you say you're cutting spending when in fact spending is increasing, according to the numbers that we just discussed?
Well, first of all, that's wrong on two levels, and then I got to stop. First of all, as I told you, the budget agreement has already cut about $1 trillion of spending.
Right, but cut, you say, but the numbers show that each year spending is greater.
I understand. Okay,
is that correct?
Yes, I'll clear that up for you. It's why I think it's misleading to constantly talk about trillions without talking about as a share of the economy. Every year, the population grows. Every year, inflation grows. And that means that even...
I thought they adjusted for inflation.
No, they don't. No, those are all nominal numbers, the ones you gave, which actually you should adjust them for inflation. Well, but if you do them as a share of GDP, then you're not misleading your viewers. Then you're telling people how much of the economy is devoted to spending, okay?
But is it not an agreement to increase spending for the next 10 years?
Not as a share of the economy.
But the numbers, the amounts that are being spent are greater in 10 years than they are now. They're greater in 5 years.
Not as a share of the economy. What matters is as a share of the economy.
But isn't it true that these numbers are greater? Yeah. Isn't 5.7 greater than 3.7?
Isn't 17 less than 25?
whatever.
Okay, we got to stop. But you really should do this as a share of GDP.
You don't. Okay, well.
All right.
I'm just curious why they call it spending cuts when, in fact, what's happening is that the agreement is to increase spending. Every year it increases.
You're not hearing what I'm saying.
You're saying that it's a smaller share of the GDP.
There you go. Thank you.
It may or may not, but
No,
it is an
absolutely
increase.
is.
It is an increase.
Okay, thank you.